Welcome back to the Property Frontline. Today I'm here again with Scott Hochgesang. Hi, Scott.
Hello, everyone.
And yes, we're up to episode 18 for our Market Watch series. In this episode, we'll do as we normally do and review the Australian property market performance, but this time up until the 30th of June 2025. And in every episode, we also do an in-focus session. And this episode, we're actually forecasting, or we're looking at the forecasts for the Australian property market from July 2025 through to June 2026. So we've got a lot of really interesting information to cover, as usual. So this is a bit rare because not too many people are stopping and drawing the line at this point of the year. To get started, though, we will look at a summary of the data from the three main data houses that we rely on that have a good reputation. And don't fudge the numbers. So that's Cotality, PropTrack, SQ, and SQM. So we've put all of that into a nice, neat table for you. So Scott, would you like to go through Sydney, Melbourne, Brisbane, and Adelaide for us?
Sure, Deborah. Take a bit of a run through here. Excuse me if you hear a cough now and then. Sydney cold weather been holding me down. We've got our monthly growth stats for Sydney from Cotality CoreLogic. Market was up 0.6%. PropTrack 0.5, about the same. And SQM's asking price data 0.4%. And overall, a pretty good month for Sydney. Downwards to Melbourne. Cotality had Melbourne up 0.6%, similar to Sydney. PropTrack 0.4%, and a bit of an outlier from Louis there at SQM. Asking price data up 1.1% in Melbourne.
Melbourne people getting a little bit more bullish about the sales prices.
Some buyers show up down there, so we might have some eager vendors acting in response. Up to sunny Brisbane. Strong month there with Cotality showing 0.7% growth. It's quite a solid number for Brisbane.
Yeah.
PropTrack was lower, 0.2, and SQM very strong, 1.2%.
Yeah.
Solid month for Brisbane. And down to Adelaide, 0.5% growth from Cotality. PropTrack stronger at 0.7, and really our outlier there, a crazy 2% increase.
Yeah.
SQM data.
In the asking prices, yeah.
I do find there's a bit of bumpiness in a couple of markets in that SQM data, so take that with a little bit of grain of salt. Rolling back over to Debra to take us through our other capital cities.
Okay, thanks, Scott. So Perth, Cotality had Perth up by 0.8%. PropTrack up by 0.3%. SQM up by 1.2%. Hobart down by 0.2% for Cotality. PropTrack has them up by 0.6%. So really diverse numbers. Like why? That's a big difference. Anyway. And then SQM asking prices for Hobart down by 0.4%. Darwin, which is like really having its moment in the sun. Darwin, Cotality has it up by 1.8%. PropTrack 0.1%, and SQM down 1.2%. Canberra, Cotality up by 1.1%, PropTrack down by 0.4%, and
up, Deborah.
Oh, sorry, up. I always do that. Up. And then look at that. Canberra asking prices up by 3.7%. I mean, it's a pretty small market, but anyway, let's see how that goes. Right, and on to the trend graph, which I really, really love because the numbers are not my favorite. I prefer to see the images. So this is the annual house percentage price change over time. And so we can see here, after Perth's amazing performance, it is now starting to really come back to join all the other locations. What is the other really standout one? Is Darwin, on the upward rise. I would say Hobart trending up, Canberra trending up, and Melbourne starting to pick up.
Melbourne popping up from some pretty negative numbers there recently.
Yeah, look at that.
I think we're starting to see at least some data and evidence of the turnaround there.
Yeah. Yep. I think it's still too soon, but I know you don't. Okay, over to you, Scott, for the rental market.
Sure. There's been a lot of changes in the rental market over the past 12 months. What we're really seeing is a stabilization of rents in our capital cities. I think gone are the days of 10 to 15% rent increases, and we're going to be looking more at your traditional 3 to 5% rent increases, at least for some period of time.
Yeah.
The data is showing largest rent increases. This is annual rental price increases in Hobart, Darwin, and Perth.
Yeah.
All in the 4 to 5% range. Sydney and Melbourne are really flat rents, is what this is saying. 0 to 1%. We've got a cut at the units over on the right, and we do still see some spikes in some of the smaller markets on unit rents. I see Perth very high up in that list.
Yeah.
Really just due to house prices have run up so much there, and house rents have run up so much. It's just pushing a lot of people out of that price segment, and they're having to look at units to rent. So I think there's some catch up going on there.
Yeah.
Perth, Adelaide, and Brisbane, and Sydney and Melbourne have really kind of stabilized into that 1 to 3% price growth for unit rents.
Yep. Okay. All right. And on to our next slide. So before we start looking at the forecast, Scott's going to take us through price performance.
Sure. We figured we'd look at the first half of the year because we've now got that in the data. So this is what's happened in the markets from January to June. So first 6 months of 2025. This is the totality data, and we're going to look at houses. For those of you watching this on screen, the year-to-date figure is going to show us January to June. So we've had growth so far this year of 2.5% in Sydney, 2.1% in Melbourne, Brisbane slightly higher, 2.9%. So there hasn't been a lot of growth in the last 6 months. Adelaide, Perth, and Hobart all lower, slightly under 2%. Darwin, as Debra has pointed out, has had that crazy spike of 8%, and Canberra 1.5%. So, most markets have grown under 3% in the first 6 months of the year.
Scott, take us through this.
Well, we ran across this data from the Australian Property Valuers Institute. Thank them very much for putting this together. 20 and 50-year house price changes.
Yeah.
So, we're going to be talking about forecasts in a minute, but I did think it was worthwhile just looking at the long-term trends here. And we need to look at the data over a long enough period of time to get through a couple of housing cycles. So that chart on the left shows 20 years of house price growth. Number one performers, Adelaide, actually, 175% growth in their house prices in that time frame. Small little Hobart popped up as 2, and then we see Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne. But they're all pretty well in the same ballpark. Perth actually, even with all of its growth in the last couple of years, hasn't done dramatically well over 20 years, and that's because it had that long period of no growth after its mining boom.
Yeah.
But if you wanted to really look at it over a long period of time, we've got 50 years of data here. If you know anyone that's owned a house for 50 years, you can see on average what it might have gone up for them. And I just thought it was interesting to look at this data and see that our top performers have been, Sydney number 1, Brisbane number 2, beating out Melbourne, and Melbourne's come in number 3. So kind of our larger capital cities have done the best. What does this data actually mean? So if you had invested $100,000 in Sydney property back in 1975, I believe that 3,800% means that $100,000 is now worth $3.9 million.
Excellent.
Just a bit of background as we kind of go into the forecast, so we know what's happened in the space.
Yep. Okay. All right. So mentionable news. So we always have this segment in Market Watch. So we've just had most of the states and territories hand down their budgets, and most of them included something about housing. In WA, mentionable, they've got their Key Start program, and they've added this new offer for first home buyers where you can purchase and build a property using just 2% deposit, but for modular homes. Now, they do have all the other grants and exemptions that all the other states and territories offer, but this one I thought was really interesting. So it's a special one just to build modular homes, so you're building them fast. In New South Wales has got a wide range of offering for their first home buyers, but in the last budget, so June 2025, they included a portion of money, a significant portion of money to actually help developers, which is basically, in summary, a 5-year pre-sale finance guarantee. So the developers can get started instead of waiting on pre-sales, which is holding up the starts for some of the major construction areas. In Queensland, they had this really unique offering of a grant of $30,000 if you were buying new, and that was supposed to end on the 30th of June 2025, and in the last budget they announced that it was going to be running for another 12 months. I think some of your clients, Scott, were like, whew, that's good.
Definitely had a few under the wire that were looking really hard in June, and I told them, got a few more months now.
Yeah.
Something good.
That's good. But the other really big news that's happening in Queensland, from the 1st of August, they will be changing their contract legislation so that whenever you buy, you will be provided with a seller's disclosure pack of information, which will include the information that we normally would get from the New South Wales and Victorian contracts. So this, the Queensland new seller's disclosure will include things like easements and neighbourhood disputes and zoning, any other interesting things that the owners have done to their property and whether that has been approved by council or not. So lots and lots of information that I used to have to collect in bits and pieces will now be presented in a pack. You will still need to check it, but if anything in that information was misleading, buyers will be able to withdraw. So watch that space. It's going to be interesting, but very good news for buyers. Okay, so over to you, Scott, for the last 2 points.
So we had the RBA head fake, let's call it, on Tuesday. For those of
It's
you that
fake.
were paying attention to interest rates, it's the so obviously we were all expecting a 0.25% rate cut on Tuesday. The markets were expecting it. The betting odds were over 90%,
Yeah.
and surprisingly, no rate cut. And the votes were 6 saying no cut, and 3 did want a cut. So there were a few people on that RBA board who felt the economy was weak enough and inflation in good enough control that they would have cut, but the majority said no. So we're going to have to wait for a bit more of inflation data to come in. We've got a data drop coming in, I believe, in the next 4 weeks or so before the next meeting.
Yeah.
And we'll go back to thinking, surely we're going to have a rate cut at that next meeting. I wouldn't take all your money down to the casino and make that bet, but feels again like it is going to happen. We'll just have to wait and see. And there's a lot of global uncertainty caused by a certain U.S. president whose name begins with a T. Obviously, all the tariff drama going on there. It's shifting over to pharmaceuticals and a few other industries now. Talk of 200% tariffs on pharmaceutical drugs and medical supplies that countries like Australia and others in Europe send to the U.S. Whether that's going to happen or not, who knows? But I think it's creating a lot of uncertainty. We do have one large company in that space, CSL, that would be impacted by that. So I think we're hopeful that Albo will put on his best negotiating hat and go over to DC and see what he can do to do a deal with the Don.
Yeah.
Everyone hang in there.
Yeah, sounds good. So for our In Focus session, Scott and I are going to be looking at, have you got your binoculars, Scott?
I got the high-powered ones. Look at these, Deborah. These are super top-notch.
We're looking into the future through to June 2026.
I have to work on the focus on these for next time, I think. But
Yeah.
we're going to look out into the future and see what they're saying, right?
Okay, sounds good. So when we're looking at a forecast, we not only need to look at past sales data, there's a lot of other information that we want to look at that is predictive, that is showing us where the market might head. So we're just going to flip through a couple of the key influences on the market. So starting with listings. So this chart shows the number of new listings, so people putting their property on the market. Nationally, we're seeing the number of new listings have a big drop, so that is less properties available to buy. And then total listings, a mixture of new and property that has still been on the market for a couple of months. The combined average is not as dramatic a drop, but it's still a very big decrease in stock compared to that dotted line, which is the 5-year average. So that is a concern, and that means less properties, higher prices, more buyers to compete. Then looking at this from a state-by-state perspective, so Sydney is trending close to the 5-year average, so that's all right. Melbourne, right on the 5-year average, but look at Brisbane. So 5 years ago, that was when, Brisbane was pretty flatline and quite well priced. And when there was more property on the market, and now people are reluctant to sell because their properties are going up in value. Anyway, so Adelaide, a big drop down, Perth, a long way away from the 5-year average, and Hobart just starting to come back to its normal trend. So tightening. Then median days on market. So this is how long does it take for a property to sell? And like during COVID times, we were down to like less than 10 days for some areas. And we're actually still seeing that in some cases. So nationally, we are seeing a bit of a rise, but then when you actually drill down and look particularly at key areas, like a good example, you can see that in Perth, at this time last year, they were selling properties in around about 9 days, and now they're saying 16 days. So it's still an incredibly fast market. And what else? What other one? I guess looking at Brisbane. So Brisbane has also seen a little bit of steam come out of that market. So last year, 15 days, and this year, 24. But really, like a nice normal market, we would expect to see 35 days. I would say, yeah, around 30 days. All right, and the final predictive piece of data is new starts. So, like a couple of years ago, or actually was it last year, 2024, the federal government came out and said, we're going to build 1.2 million properties in the next 5 years. And pretty much straight away, commencements hit the wall. And so this graph is showing that we are a long way behind where we need to be. So we need around about, to meet the target that the federal government set, we need to build around about 240,000 homes a year. And last year we only started 100 or just under 170, and yeah, we're still like it. Honestly, I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to have to just really get brickies from every country in the world to come over and help us build, because
it's just a shocking shortfall.
Shocking.
I think immigration numbers have fallen a bit, but I mean, if you need anything to give you any confidence in the Australian property market over the next 5 years, in my opinion, it's this data. We just cannot build enough properties to house all of our people for many, many reasons we could get into.
Yeah, exactly. And so with that, Scott, would you like to start us off with the forecast?
Back to binoculars? No, we're not going to use our own binoculars this time. We're going to have a look at what some of these experts say. We've got some data that was widely circulated from Domain, and they've done fiscal year 25-26 forecasts for houses and units for our capital cities. So this is what they are expecting the growth to be from now, July 1 till June 30th of next year. And I'll just run through the list, starting with their strongest performers. So they think Sydney's house prices are going to be the top performer in the coming year. Houses up 7%, units up 6%. They're projecting Melbourne to be also very strong. Houses up 6 and units up 5. Over to Perth, I'll focus just more on the houses, I think, here. So Perth house prices, they're thinking 5% growth. Brisbane, 5%. Adelaide, slightly less at 4%. And Canberra, 4%. And as Debra has noted, they seem to not want to mention Hobart.
Or Tasmania.
Or Darwin. They are capital cities, but didn't pick those up in the chart. So anyways, kind of, one cut of forecast there for everybody to be thinking about. They're all quite positive.
Yeah.
Sydney up at the top.
Yeah. Okay. And on to the big four banks. And I love to record what they've forecast, because they're never right. Anyway.
Never right, and often radical, because they want to get press for their bank names. So it's probably better for them to say something out of the ordinary, because they'll get more media coverage from that.
So would you like to cover Westpac and NAB?
Sure. So we're going to focus on the 2026 line, which we believe is calendar year 2026 here. So Westpac's given us growth rates for capital cities. Their top performer, they believe, is going to be Melbourne. House
Yeah.
prices going up 8%. Most of the other capital cities going up 6%. That's Sydney, Brisbane, Perth, and Adelaide. Hobart going up 4%. Over to NAB. NAB is a Brisbane fan, so we've got
Yeah.
Brisbane over 8% growth in that coming year, followed by Perth at 6.9%. It's not too many people predicting that much growth coming out of Perth in the coming year, so we'll just note that. And we've got Adelaide and Melbourne next at 5.6 and 5.5. Sydney just right around 5% growth, and Hobart slightly lower down at 2%. Back over to Debra for our other two big banks. What are they saying, Debra?
Okay, so CBA, which kind of has been a little bit more reliable, they also concur with Westpac, with Melbourne up by 8%, Brisbane up by 9%, and Perth up by 7%, with Sydney, Adelaide. So Sydney up by 6%, Adelaide up by 4%, and they're not seeing much change in Hobart. Then ANZ, so they've hedged their bets. So ANZ are saying that Melbourne, Brisbane, and Perth will track fairly similarly at 4.3%, whereas Sydney they're expecting up by 3.7%, and Hobart up by just under 2%, 1.8%. So we'll see how they go with that forecast. We'll check in again with them this time next year.
Bunch of pessimists over there, Debra.
Okay, Scott, can you take us through this?
Yeah, so we're switching back to Louis' data over at SQM. Now, he hasn't done a reforecast like some of the others have, because it's a lot of work for him to put those forecasts together every year and get them all packaged into a report. Thank Louis for doing that for us through the years. But this was the scenario he believed we were on back in March and April when we got that first rate cut. So the SQM forecasts for this is really for this year. Are, Perth still going up 15 to 20%. I think Debra and I probably both feel that's going to come in on the high side. Brisbane strong 11 to 16%, very possible. Darwin 6 to 10% up. Melbourne was his low performer, up 2 to 6%. Maybe getting a bit of heat later this year. Sydney still pretty low, up 3 to 7% for the year. Adelaide, big spike up 10 to 14%, along with Brisbane and Perth. Hobart up 1 to 5%, and we got Canberra on there as well, 1 to 5%.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Okay.
So just to be clear, that is the calendar year 2025, and we're halfway through that.
Yeah.
So I think he's predicting, if we're sticking with that forecast, he's predicting a lot of growth in this next 6 months from July to December.
Yeah.
Some of those higher numbers. We'll see how close Louis is when we look at his numbers early next year.
Yeah. Okay. Alrighty. So now we're just checking back in with your forecast and my forecast, and really this is done based on what Scott and I buy. So Scott, like you're particularly in the new property market for like good builds that are cash flow positive mostly. And I buy pretty much everything else. So I buy existing properties. So we haven't really changed our forecast from January. This is the same table that we used in January, just running through mine. So where would I buy, or are we buying in the next 6 to 12 months? Definitely Perth, definitely Brisbane, I wouldn't buy really outside of the southeast Queensland, apart from a couple of regionals which I'll mention. And then, and we're still good to buy in Sydney. I'll talk about the regionals next. So, Scott, what's your forecast?
Yeah, I think it's actually pretty similar to yours, Deborah. We certainly like Southeast Queensland, everything from Moreton Bay through the Sunshine Coast and Gold Coast. It's just a price point issue for many now. They just can't afford to invest in many of these markets with the price growth that has occurred. We're looking at some cheaper areas. Wouldn't normally go out to Ipswich and out west of there, but we have started looking out there because you can still build houses in the 600s as we go out toward Toowoomba, and we will be talking about regionals in a minute. Being very selective in Melbourne. I know there's a lot of people that are starting to turn their focus down to Melbourne. We have been focusing really on the very low price point, avoid land tax as much as we can, smaller properties for people that do want to get some exposure into that market, believing that it will return to growth after its many years of weakness, and always, bullish on Sydney. It's not hard to be, it's hard to say anything negative on Sydney other than it's just a very expensive market to buy in.
And you've got to be smart about what you're buying. Like it is.
Yeah, look,
that goes without saying.
We
really.
actually haven't done much in Adelaide. I don't want to say it's been a bad market, just as much as it's not been a great market for people that want to buy land and build. The areas where they're building the new housing is way out of the city and really not in very desirable areas. So we've mostly stayed out of that market and have felt Hobart too small, similar to Deborah. Canberra just a bit too risky with all the government employment there, and we do like to own our own land and not take a crown lease the way that you need to over there.
Yeah, okay. All right. So on the regionals, now we talked about this just before we started the session, and what I would refer people to, if you would like some really good insights into what we are forecasting for regional properties, check out, was it episode 15, where we did Location Watch, and my top couple of choices, New South Wales, Inverell, Queensland, Gatton and Toowoomba. Would you like to highlight some of yours, Scott?
Sure. We're spending a bit more time in some regional coastal markets in Queensland. One of my favorites has been Hervey Bay. It actually has had quite good growth over the last few years, but it's a lovely market. You could kind of call it maybe the next Noosa, as some people are spruiking. I don't know if I want to call it that or not, but it needs some help on the transport side. But we do like Hervey Bay. We like going inland to Toowoomba. I already said go west of Ipswich. That area out in Gatton, out by the university, and Laidley. Basically affordable areas that are within 2 hours of that Brisbane market, because price growth in that core market is just pushing a lot of people out to those outer suburbs. Down here in New South Wales, would have a look at Maitland and some of the outer suburbs up around Newcastle. That's probably my short list. We do look at stuff out in Perth, but that's been more focused on cash flow out there and finding high cash flow dual income properties.
Yeah, but a little plug for episode 15 where we really did a deep dive on the regionals. Okay, all right. So generally tips for the next 12 months and really anytime you're looking at buying property, make sure that when you're making decisions based on data that you're not using misleading data. So there's a saying that the numbers don't lie, but the people who put the graphs together can sway things towards their views. So be careful of that. Use trusted sources And really, we would just direct everybody to the main data houses that we use. Always conduct the financial pros and cons of the areas that you're considering, because there will be quite a few different things to consider. And the final tip is use criteria that's tailored to your requirements. And what I'm basically saying is don't chase hot suburbs listings, because by the time you get to the suburb, the heat will probably be out of it, and this might be, or the locations might be hot because of the type of property that people are buying in that particular area, which might not be right for you. Anyway, don't do it. Just throw those things in the bin. And remember, you need to stick to your own criteria or your own strategy, because what's right for somebody else, buying 100 properties, that might not be right for you. So, yeah, what's right for someone else might not be right for you. Is there anything that you would like to add to that, Scott?
Thanks, Deborah.
And following on from my sarcastic remark just then, before we get on to what's next. So, if you would like some help in choosing your next property, you can go to Scott's Facebook page. What would you like to say about that, Scott? You give examples and things?
Sure. For those of you that check out my page, you can follow it, send me a bit of information about yourself, and I'll accept a friend request, and you can get some more detailed information. We often put up new property examples for areas our clients are investing in. So they might be properties that are actually available right now, not stuff that sold a year ago that you may read about online. As many property tips as we can. And it's really a strong focus on that new property space, because that's where we're working and where most of our clients are interested.
Yeah, and you'll answer questions and things like that.
Sure, I certainly will take questions, and happy to post something up there and get you back a response.
Yep, okay. Alrighty. And then on the Property Frontline side of things, we also have, in addition to our full service, we have a program called Buyer Success Program, which is really technical support for people who want to do the search themselves. It really is Australia's only interactive and in-the-moment support system, so you can take it into the field and put questions in and get answers. We've got our July intake happening starting from the end of this week, so on the 11th of July, and then the intake closes in a couple of weeks. And now, so for next time, we are covering off the fabulous topic that Scott and I are always talking about, really, property myths and big fibs. So we'll review top property myths in the market, so you know how to avoid traps that can cost you millions, plus lots more. So now it's time for us to say goodbye. So thanks a lot. See you next time. Oh, and before you go, if people would like to contact us, there'll be more details in the description box below, and subscribe if you want to know, or you want early notification of our next episode. Okay, bye-bye.
Thanks for your time, everyone.